How much can you make as a Postmates driver? What's up, guys? Brandon Sellers here with some awesome information for you, along with my boy Gridwise Jay. Say what's up, Jay.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So we are here to talk to you guys about how much Postmates drivers are making, and we're not just going to actually talk about, how much did we make this one day during a shift, are we?
No, absolutely not. We got more for it to you.
We are going to leverage our network of 150,000 rideshare and delivery drivers that are basically kind of inputting data into Gridwise. We anonymize that data and then understand, okay, how much are drivers making per hour, per mile, and per trip on Postmates. So that's what we're going to use to give you a really good idea at the national level, and then we'll throw out some specific numbers from a state level, and we'll also link below a blog post that has more information about in 41 specific states or markets how much drivers are actually making.
So Postmates is actually really unique in that they are fully transparent in how they calculate your earnings. And I love this about them. Brandon, how many times do we get obfuscated by these big companies where we simply don't know how our pay is calculated?
Yeah, DoorDash is actually kind of terrible about this. And a lot of the companies, before you sign up, you can't see, okay, how much am I making per mile or how much am I making per minute for delivery or ride share or even Instacart ship shopping and things like that. So it's really interesting that Postmates actually, before you sign up, you can really see what that information is, so you can kind of make a better decision on if you want to drive for them or not.
I just love that about Postmates. They're very clear in how they calculate your earnings, and they tell you up front, you can do this right now, drivers. Those of you watching the video, link in the description below. You can go to their website and figure out your specific city, just how much you get paid, down to the nitty-gritty details: rate per pickup, rate per drop-off, rate per minute, and also the rate per mile. To give you an example, in my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I will make $1.30 per pickup plus 70 cents when I drop off and 7 cents for every minute that I'm on that trip and 58 cents for every mile that I drive while on that delivery. So these are really clear, and they bolded it. They say clear earnings, instant deposits. So it's a little different per city and per region. And I think that's one of the defining characteristics that those of you watching, you have to really dive in to your market to figure things out, because my market's different than your market. For example, in Chicago, the rate is almost doubled to $1.01 instead of 58 cents. But don't think that Chicago drivers make more money, because we have the data. We actually have the data from 150,000 drivers in our network that is pretty surprising. Chicago drivers actually make less than Pittsburgh drivers, even though the rate per mile is a lot more. So more on that. So make sure you watch this video to the end.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, it's kind of funny, like thinking about like looking at the payouts and seeing like 7 cents per minute, and it's almost like you can keep that like 7 cents per minute on this. Like, when this is like that's terrible. You gotta do a little bit better there, Postmates. But it is good to at least have some transparency there for sure. So, I mean, I think one of the key things here for drivers is we're going to talk about, okay, how much you earn, but how do you actually break down what you earn? What does that actually mean? There's a couple metrics that we at Gridwise, we found that drivers should really pay attention to for them to be able to maximize their profitability. One would be earnings per hour, which is kind of a no-brainer, right? In most professions, you're going to want to care about, hey, what am I making per hour here? You're certainly trading your time for money here. You want to understand, hey, what's the value there, and how can I maximize that value? Understanding your earnings per hour is just kind of a no-brainer. But it's also not the only thing that you should really be paying attention to. You should also be thinking about, hey, how much am I actually making per mile? And this is actually a little bit more important for rideshare drivers than it is delivery drivers, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that your per mile rate is greater than your total and your true kind of expenses, especially that in terms of what's going into your car, right? So you have things, certainly more so for rideshare drivers, you have things like you likely have bought like a new car for rideshare. There's a really good chance you've done that. And then so you want to make sure that kind of like depreciation is in there, and which can, be a significant factor. And that's something that you should be thinking about. And so if you can understand that with depreciation and maintenance and repairs and all that stuff, my expenses are going to be 60 cents per mile, then that if you're kind of trending down toward that, then you're not really making like a ton of money. It's just a good way to kind of understand, okay, what's my profit from an expense standpoint, including expenses as well, instead of just like what your net income is. So a little bit more important on the rideshare side, because delivery drivers, you can drive whatever car. If you are a delivery driver, you should almost certainly be using some crappy car that you got for like $1,000, that, you don't even kind of think about appreciation or repairs or maintenance and things like that. But it's still something that you should be aware of and you should be thinking about. Then there's also earnings per trip, right? And that's really important so that you can kind of do cross comparison. So if you want to look at DoorDash versus Postmates versus Uber Eats, etc., a good way to do that is just, hey, where are my per trip earnings more and less? And then of course, like, you can look at that by day, you can look at that by the times of day, things like that, right? So per trip, per mile, and then per hour stats are certainly overall what we want to be taking a look at.
A general rule of thumb is that you should always keep your earnings per mile greater than the federal mileage tax deduction, because they calculated that tax deduction based off of how much they expect you to lose per mile. Now, you're not going to lose 57.5 cents per mile driven. I think most expenses are, for average cars, around 20 to 40 at the higher end cents per mile that you actually incur in expenses. Now, this includes what Brandon said, which is vehicle depreciation, which a lot of us don't calculate, as well as fuel, maintenance, and all that other stuff. So, good rule of thumb, keep it above the federal mileage rate, your earnings per mile.
Definitely. I mean, at least, because if you're trending pretty close to that federal mileage rate, and if you're thinking about that as, well, that's my baseline for what my costs are for my car, then you're trending toward breaking even, which obviously you don't want to be breaking even. You want to be making like a lot of money, right? So that's definitely like a baseline, but you obviously want to be aiming like pretty high with that.
How much are Postmates drivers earning nationally across the board? $11.39 a median from the months of April till now. April through August, everybody across the board in our network of drivers earned a grand total of $11.39 per mile, per hour. Now, keep in mind that this is a median and not an average. Okay, guys? So you can make a lot above this or a lot lower than this. So this is a national median.
National median. And then you have, obviously, also, it changes quite a bit in terms of where you live, right? So if you are a driver in, let's say, I'm looking at some data right now. If I'm a driver in Boston, my median is $17.92 an hour. But if I'm a driver in Phoenix, it's only $12.98. But if I'm a driver in, looks like Dallas, only $7.59. So it definitely depends pretty heavily on your market. And it's not even just completely about your market size. It's also about how big is Postmates in that market. Because Postmates is certainly a decently sized, one of the bigger delivery companies, but they're not as big as DoorDash. They're not as big as Uber Eats, things like that. So there's definitely a greater likelihood that you could be kind of sitting around a little bit and having some dead minutes, So.
A great example of what Brandon just said is what we talked about at the start of today's video, the difference in earnings between Chicago and Pittsburgh as classic examples. Pittsburgh is a much smaller city and market than Chicago. And we talked about Postmates changing the calculation on how much you get paid as well. And remember when I said earlier that in Chicago, drivers earn $1.01 per mile. Drivers in Pittsburgh are only 58 cents per mile. So logically, you might be thinking Pittsburgh drivers make less than Chicago drivers. Well, we got the data, and that is simply not true. Pittsburgh's median earnings per hour is almost $17 per hour at $16.99 over this period. Chicago drivers, on the other hand, only median $7.87. So almost half. Pittsburgh drivers are earning twice as much. Now, we have a couple of theories as to why this is happening. Starting with the fact that there's just more drivers out there in Chicago. Yes, you may have more demand from a lot more people ordering deliveries and things like that, but you also have a lot more saturation of the market with drivers out there, especially during these Corona times where a lot more people are getting into gig work for one reason or the other. So one of the theories is that, look, there's just too many fish in the pond and not enough flakes on the top of the surface to be grabbing and eaten.
That was a great analogy there. Yeah, but I mean that's super true. And again, like market dynamics play a pretty big part in these earnings, in the earnings per service. I pretty much guarantee if I look at DoorDash earnings, those numbers are going to be either flipped or a lot closer. Because DoorDash and if I look at Uber Eats, I'm going to see the same thing. Uber Eats and DoorDash are a lot bigger in Chicago, so there's just going to be so much more demand here, right? So it's a lot about market dynamics. So it's again another reason why track your own earnings. You can certainly benchmark against your own city, but also benchmark against yourself and make sure that you're working to improve. Where DoorDash is great in one market, Uber Eats might be better in another market. Instacart might be the best in another market, right? So it's all about tracking your earnings, see what services are working for you, and then you can maximize.
Now, we're not going to go over all the cities, but we have quite a bit of data here. If you want to see your specific city and how much Postmates drivers are earning on median there, link in the description below to our blog post where we have an entire research study written up about this with nice, pretty graphs and all the number that you can crunch yourself. So check it out, description below for your specific city.
Yeah, or we will when about the time we post it. Yep, we will have that link below. 41 markets that we're going to have specifically kind of laid out there. So, yep, you can kind of check and see, hey, how much are folks making in Tampa Bay, Orlando, Sacramento, benchmark between that. We didn't talk much about earnings per hour, we talked a lot about earnings per hour. We didn't talk much about earnings per mile or per trip, but that data will be there as well. So you can kind of see, as Jay was saying, what's like the average earnings per mile, what's that benchmark for me, and what does that look like from a national standpoint, certainly, and then in my specific market.
If you want more data analytics like today's video, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel right now. Click that bell or else you're not going to get notified, because that's how YouTube works. Make sure you like this content and share with other drivers out there, because the benefit of such a large driver network is the fact that it's so freaking large. We help one another. With that being said, also download Gridwise today to join the network for free. Have a good day, drivers.
Have a good one.